Okay, now that I have. So, just basically two items on the agenda today. I'm just going to share with you our draft implementation advocacy letter. The state has not yet used a window in which to submit it, but we're going to send it when they do. And then going over some of the draft strategies from the packet, which is being published today, later today. So our little chat here is just a starting point. There will be about 2 weeks in which you can go over the whole thing and submit as much comment as you wish. So on that note, for the implementation advocacy letter, for this is so the implementation phase was originally planned to be $1 million. With the state's budget crisis, the proposed revisions, let's say, to the implementation phase that will now be $150 million. Still over 3 years. So about $25 million for general implementation and 25 for tribal in the first year, 24 through 25, and then 50 million in general implementation for the next 2 fiscal years after that. We have some comments both generally on the implementation guidelines and also asking the state to re-add that money back into the implementation fund once our budget is hopefully a little more stabilized. Um, the we're our leadership is of uncertain confidence on whether or not the money will get added back in, but we're going to be asking regardless. So read out the whole thing, but rural communities everywhere face unique challenges, specifically in Eastern Sierra land tenure and management, access these services, housing, and quality jobs. These requests reflects a sense of neglect and isolation among the Eastern Sierra communities. It is imperative that we recognize the invaluable contributions of rural communities to our state's cultural heritage, economic diversity, public lands, and resilience. Therefore, I urge you to prioritize the following initiatives. I sent a copy of this to everyone in the reminder email last week. If I did not, link in the chat.
Eric, not the biggest thing, but we kind of interchangeably in this are using Eastern Sierra region and Eastern Sierra, which I would consider kind of two different geographies there.
Okay.
So if it's possible to use Eastern Sierra region for surf, because I know when some would hear Eastern Sierra, that is specifically Inyo and Mono County, not necessarily the Eastern Sierra region of, the
Or
and I mean specifically the paragraph after that, because that says Eastern Sierra region. The next one says specifically in the Eastern Sierra.
so the specifics, I think many of us are well aware of that bullet. At least 40% of funds provide direct, meaningful, and assured benefits to disinvested communities. Median household income stats, high poverty data, and cost of living calculators in recreation recreation-based rural communities are often skewed due to the nature of second homeowners. This gentrification process displaces full-time residents, making access be adding in a little bit of data there once we're actually given a timeline for submitting it.
Yeah, Eric, I would also want to put in there that a lot of the finance medium household incomes, and certainly in some communities, are skewed because of COVID. where second homeowners actually came up and made it their primary residence during COVID. And now that they've gone, um, we're stuck with a high and medium household income in the statistics, but they're not real because those wealthy people have gone back to their original homes.
Okay, right. So, uh,
Skewed due to the nature of second homeowners, especially with data that's post or during COVID.
Yes, that's the problem, is that the
yeah,
statistics are lagging.
right,
Probably that affects Alpine County more than it affects most of the others, but our median household income put us way above the state average for 2 years.
right.
And now we're back down to where we were before in terms of relation to the state average.
It doesn't skew the statistics in Alpine County. uh,
One
so,
other thing, if I can back up a paragraph,
yep,
um, it says where it says imperative that we recognize. Who's we? I presume the Sierra Business Council already recognizes it's imperative that the state recognizes.
state. That makes more sense. Okay. Yeah, so our we request that they provide more clarity around disinvested communities and revise with a rural community lens for all regions. Some of the bullets outlined in the SFP, which is a separate document, our region's competitiveness for implementation funds. Last year, the Eastern Sierra region built upon the definition provided by the state. This definition is a living draft designed to better suit the disinvested communities in our region while still empowering the pillars of the California Development Program. Please let each region submit their tailored definition for disinvested communities. And if the state agencies approve, please use these definitions as metrics for determining the equity.
Eric, I'm a little bit concerned about the way we're asking for things as opposed to making recommendations. Um, I don't think that you ever get anything out of the state when you start off saying, please do this for me. I think it's much better if it was written with the idea of making recommendations to the state. This is basically what we found in this region, what works, what doesn't work, and recommend that the state makes these changes, as opposed to asking the state to make the changes. Maybe it's a subtle difference, but to me, it looks much weaker when you have a please in there.
Okay.
What about a problem solution statement? I know when it's saying some of the bullets outlined hinder our competitiveness, the question I have is, okay, what? You know, as an example to show that this is something that doesn't make sense. Being able to say, such as these things, this is the problem, is the disinvested community's definition is not clear and it hinders our competitiveness because X, Y, Z don't work here. Solution, we recommend each region be able to build their own definition.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Um,
Could you say something other than along the lines of Supervisor Brandon? We have found that more clarity is necessary around disinvested communities. You know, because that, like Supervisor Griffith said, that shows that we've already found it. We know it's there, and we need them to recognize. And I mean,
right.
it's a semantical change, but definitely like encapsulates that a bit.
Mhm. Okay,
Makes sense to me.
great. So joined. 1760878. Is that, can you hear us?
Yeah, this is Jen Roser. I'm traveling, and unfortunately, I may drop back out of service again. But I just thought I'd try to listen in.
Got it. Okay. Thanks, Jen. Drive safe.
Yeah, thank you.
So, so along the format, I guess the way that you approach it, there may not make a lot of difference, but do we have a definition of disinvested communities? I mean, we went round and round about that in our last meeting, it seems like. So do we have one that most folks at least are comfortable with?
Erica, what is our latest version of disinvested communities? Do you know?
So, Rosemary, for the catalyst and implementation, we cannot use that definition that we sort of tailored for our region. The state wants us to use their definition. So there's like those 4 or 5 bullets that were originally outlined in the SFP in the very beginning. So it's, tribal, reservations, low income, there's all those like various standards, and that's what we have to work with right now. So that's why we were advocating in this letter, because this is for implementation criteria. There's nothing that we can do about catalyst. That's what we received and viewed back in North Lake Tahoe in April was our bare minimum for catalyst. But moving forward into implementation, we are asking them to include a more rural bullet for disinvested, because there's lots of definitions out there. The USDA has one, various agencies have a rural definition that they could incorporate. And it doesn't mean the whole county has to be rural. It just means if a project fell in that rural definition, that it would be prioritized as disinvested throughout the state. So that's what we're asking for, just for a little bit of background.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you. But I do think David's on the right track. I think please let each region submit their tailored definition. I think we ought to say, this is one that works for us. It's what we want to use, essentially, rather than, I mean, I have no idea what's going on in other regions. You may have a better sense of that, but I think we ought to say this is one that we believe is appropriate for our sub-region or region.
Yeah, we can definitely include that. I mean, I think that, and maybe like add a little bit of language, and Eric, we can talk more offline about this, but just to make sure that we're coming off like there is like our definition is quantified compared to the rest of the state.
Yeah, and I think that maybe, I don't want to put words in David's mouth, but I think the thrust is to say, look, we've thought this through, and your definition just doesn't work. Here's ours, which will work for us, by the way.
Yeah, I will say though, if so the project ID subcommittee kind of got the first glimpse, and there's still some edits being made, but I believe it's back up on our website. We made a map. We worked with the GIS tech to show the geographic areas that are considered disinvested by the state definition. And we actually have a lot of terrain. We have more than you would think. Like all of Alpine County is disinvested.
So what's the color coding? Can you explain the key briefly?
So the color coding is just a variety, the various definitions, like the qualified opportunity zones or tribal boundaries or low-income communities. For the purposes of something,
right, but I'm sorry, but what is like Alpine is dark pink or whatever you want to call it. What does that connote?
The dark pink is, I believe it's a combination of the disadvantaged communities and the climate justice tool. So For the purposes of qualifying as a community and therefore being eligible to count for the various criteria, it doesn't matter what shade they are or if they meet one or more. It just, if there's a color on it, it counts. We're trying to get it, we're having our GIS tech change it so that all of the shades are just one color to make it a little less confusing.
Okay. So the color doesn't attempt to convey information. It's really the shape.
Yes. The base, if there's a color overlay on it, it's good news. Well, it's good news for the purposes of Catalyst.
Okay.
Good news because they're disinvested.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Got it. Got it.
So, yeah. So basically, we were well, is not the right word, but of our region fit one of the various criteria than we had initially expected.
Okay.
And then also just one little quick note, projects don't have to necessarily fall within those areas that are shaded. We just have to have a metric that shows that there's a positive impact on those shaded areas. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me get back to the letter here.
One minor note, in your letter, you go back and forth between I and we. You just need to settle on one.
Okay.
Or make it impersonal and just say the Sierra Business Council.
Yeah. SBC. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably more
Or,
professional.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, okay, yeah. So on that topic of disinvested communities, one of the bullets was include an applicant or co-applicant located in or serving a disinvested community. Response is low population and capacity makes this physically complicated for rural communities. There are not as many opportunities for a co-applicant due to limited pools. Something due to a limited pool and resources. Additionally, most CBOs in rural regions cannot float the initial upfront investment costs, and therefore reimbursement finances can make project startup impossible. So the request is make additional points for projects that include a co-op instead of flat out requiring. Next was aligned with Executive Order N-16-22, embedding racial equity. Our request is pretty general. Please provide more clarity. What is the application of this? We're still at a little bit of a loss on this one, and they have not provided any further clarity on it yet. For job quality annex, please feel free to interrupt me. You've got a comment.
Eric, just out of curiosity, I guess I'm wondering, does SBC know whether other folks have asked the same question and received some sort of an answer? Or I guess is there communication across the agencies or the organizations that are taking a lead on this in terms of where the questions are and what kinds of answers, if any, they're getting from the state?
Erica, have you had any recent communication with Redwood or North State about these topics?
No, there's no new information that's come down. Anything that we've asked for clarifying on this, they've said that they will get back to us when it gets closer, but it's also partially it's on us to define what it means. So for example, when I asked more clarification on what the 40% meant, they said, well, that could be a number of things. It could be geography, it could be dollars, it could be, it's up to us to figure out what that metric means. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, I guess. So going back to the earlier conversation, then I guess the question becomes one of, do we have any recommended interpretation of what that should mean in our area? So if we're going to include up above the definition of disinvested community that works for us, does it make sense? Do we have anything on what we think that should mean in our area?
Do you mean outside the definition that we were wordsmithing last fall?
No, just do we have along the lines of the disinvested community conversation that we had and the definition, I guess, that we sort of batted around, do we have something on this embedding racial equity that we could include to say, this works for us? Tell us why, you can tell us why it doesn't work for you, but otherwise, this is what we believe we should go with.
Every time we've brought it up with the state, they don't have an answer for us. We've asked
yeah, but that's, I think, I don't know, I'll look to David and Jaron and Trina, but I think, maybe it's a matter of saying, since you don't have an answer, this is the one that we believe is appropriate for our area.
It does feel like anytime we're saying, please provide more clarity or more information without being specific to the problem, we're just going to get the same technical assistance letter that you probably already have, and they'll say refer to that. So
I would agree with that. I think using the word please at all with the state is should be very sparse, and the more direct and specific you can be in, this isn't what we're asking for, this is what we need from you, is best.
Well, or alternatively to say, we thought about this and this is what we're going to go with absent information, contrary information from you or feedback from you or however you want to put it. But
yeah,
if we're not getting answers to these critical questions and we need to move forward utilizing the concepts, then, we give it our best shot. And when they get around to it, then we can push back and say, well, we told you this is what works for us.
Yeah.
And this is, so if you provide some alternative, then we push back and say, it doesn't work for us because what you proposed doesn't work for us because.
Yeah.
Eric, asking too about the elephant in the room, these are 7 very white counties that lack a lot of diversity compared to the rest of the state. Reading we're not sure what this executive order means. Is it because the order is unclear, or is it because it doesn't apply very well to communities that aren't particularly diverse? And, are we putting that type of statement in there?
I can jump in here, Eric. Jaron, I think it was more so around our collaborative didn't understand, including SVC. We're unclear on how we're supposed to apply this piece as criteria to projects.
Okay, so any any region or job first would probably have the same questions then. Or is it related to kind of how do we apply it again, giving those demographics?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. It's just they gave us the one, not even a full sentence bullet, and said this is criteria that you have to meet for catalyst projects and implementation projects. And we're like, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that if there's not a BIPOC component, that it's not going to qualify? Because you're right, we are a region that is very white. And so that would be a big barrier for many projects coming forward.
But I think to Rosemarie's point is we should probably give Steve some homework, I think, and ask him to like come up with SBCs, how SBC will work with this in lieu of any further direction. Standing those concerns.
Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming that we need to have some baseline definitions. That's part of the reason I think we went round and round on disinvested communities. I don't remember conversations about this one necessarily, but I think if, you know, there's a part of me that wants to say, absent direction from you or further input from you, we're going to use the definitions for these key phrases that make sense to us, that we believe are workable, and I think that's the key point, right? Because if they come back with some state level definition that works for other areas but not ours, you know, we're trying to swim upstream. So
Well,
I think, you know, it's an opportunity to educate, and it's also an opportunity to say, you know, we've considered this and we believe that this is workable in our region. I'm sorry, David, I think I cut you off.
No, I interrupted. It's my fault. My concern is that in the end, they've got the hammer. And when it comes to implementation grants going out for funding, if our definition doesn't meet the requirements for the funding, we're not going to get it. So unless we can get the state to move and be more specific, or maybe move in our direction, and give us that flexibility ahead of time, you know, we may be cutting off our nose to spite our face, so to speak.
Would it make
I hear what you're, yeah, go ahead, Jared.
I'm just saying, as opposed to having, I imagine if Dave or Steve was to go create, you know, with SBC, a unique definition to our area, that would be the maximum resistance because it would be highly scrutinized. It's, you know, original, it's completely new. As opposed to kind of with the disinvested communities, there's multiple definitions recognized by a variety of agencies. We could choose which one of these already somewhat vetted public agency definitions and say, this one works better for us. That way we maybe don't run into that as much, David. I think if we created a new definition, they'd say, that's great, but like you said, this is ours. If we said, you know, this doesn't work, but the USDA's definition does accommodate this, I feel like they could say, oh, okay, that's a vetted equity policy. We can adopt that. We can allow that.
You know, we just remember that, you know, the big bucks are not just within the regions; they're competitive with other regions, and so
good point.
There may be a lot of pushback if we're asking for special dispensation from the other regions, and let's face it, that's where the votes are.
Alex?
I was just going to recommend, and before it got brought up by you and Erica, that we kind of create a data-driven kind of solution to this problem using that map that you guys had. It got brought up in a previous meeting as well. And just, it leaves things, in my opinion, less up to interpretation. You know, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, creating a new definition of it disinvested. We can say, here's the data, right? Here's our map of our disinvested communities. And here's the supporting data that we have from Lightcast to say that they are disinvested. So that was just kind of my input.
We don't have consensus, I think, as to what is the best approach for this. So I think I got all the comments down mostly. So we'll revisit this whole thing and put some thought into well, hopefully what the best tack is. Of job quality and access, one of the bullets was promote the creation of family sustaining jobs with healthcare and retirement benefits, upward mobility, access to training, consistent scheduling, safe working conditions, and opportunities for collective worker input. In terms of our region, how do we address seasonal work in this region? Many jobs like forestry positions that are supporting climate wildfire mitigation do not provide full benefits, consistent scheduling, or safe working conditions. And seasonal wages often drive the region, and our region won't be able to meet the desired wage standards. So the request being to the state, please provide less detail on this bullet or add a rural communities lens to the detailed examples.
And I didn't quite understand the less detail.
Um,
Am I missing something?
Basically, don't require these things, like, or require fewer of them.
Okay.
Well, almost any of those to some extent we may be weaker on. We have less, for organized labor, there's generally less upward mobility, especially thinking tourism, but somewhat natural resources too. Would it just be the elimination of this section or an alternative definition? If we took all those things out of it, it basically says promote the creation of family sustaining jobs, period. Is that what we're recommending? Because basically what we're saying is we do want to have seasonal work with less benefits and, irregular scheduling that is in, less than safe working conditions, because that is a regional priority for other reasons, or that is a reality of what we can actually attract and grow here.
Right.
That's a hard way to I don't know. I feel like we need to frame that, because they would just look at it and say, well, why wouldn't you want those things in the jobs?
Yeah.
Yeah. Eric, I think that's a good point, because it's not that we don't want them. It's the latter, right? It's that there is what this is really geared toward is the Central Valley and, the urban areas where they have large companies come in, set up a campus, and all of a sudden they have thousands of positions that are paying six-figure salaries and full benefits. And that is not feasible in our region. It's just not going to happen. So it's the reality of the positions that do support our region, which are those working lands positions, those ag and ranching positions, the recreation and tourism jobs. And those, unfortunately, are all supported by small businesses. And small businesses cannot afford the standard that the state has put out. So one recent issue that has come up lately, especially in terms of benefits, right? So in order to meet this standard of what the state is calling a high wage or family wage position with full benefits and, medical benefits and retirement and all of those things, that can cost small businesses like $15,000 to $20,000 a month for just a small handful of employees. I mean, if you do the math of what that costs yearly, no one can afford that. And so they're telling us that, oh, you have to offer all these things. Well, it's not that we don't want to. I mean, everybody would love to offer those kinds of packages for their employees, but just think about like the realisticness of that and what that means, like the impact.
Right.
I would love to just have all of that written into that comment.
Yeah, I would second that. Well said, Erica.
Discussion of impact.
I mean, in using the terminology that the state may look into it, frankly, it is somewhat discriminatory to small business, less capitalized rural areas. Makes us less competitive, to urban areas. It will always, make it harder for us.
What if we phrased it as, or what if we ask them to phrase it as, or recommend creating jobs that more of these things than the current baseline by some metric. I'm trying to find some way to get at it without asking to be left to just remove the things, which would look bad.
I would, if I was to write and frame it, I would say kind of what Erica said. Jobs that have these features are ideal, but the realities for our region is that this definition doesn't work for us across the areas that are realistic and needed. We've got jobs which are of critical importance that don't match this. We've got structural barriers to meeting this definition. And it would be at the expense of, small business, something like that. So it's as we can create those, absolutely, but we can't use that as a standard.
And I have a hard time believing that the other regions aren't confronting the same difficulty, right? So if you think of around up the Tahoe area, certainly in the Central Valley, the ag workers, they're not getting that, 6-figure salary that you mentioned, Erica. So I think, again, it's sort of saying, and I guess I'm repeating some of the thoughts, but this is aspirational. Yep, we'd like to do that. But when we submit a project, we'll talk about, maybe there are 2 or 3 or 4, pick a number of these family sustaining jobs. And the rest of them may be a different character because of the realities that we face. But again, we can't be unique in that respect in California.
No,
Yeah, Rosemary, I agree with you. I think this is Jen. Think about some of the North State counties, and I can't help but think with this is, my ideal success of a project would be one that created successful sole proprietorship to meet the needs in our working landscapes industries and our federal contracting opportunities, for instance, or the ag sector. Sole proprietor opportunities may not be a quote unquote job, but that's an opportunity for somebody in a small rural area.
I think Jen, that's a great point, because for example, in tourism, the people that work for a wage, it's not a great wage, but the people that do make a good living out of it is the person that owns the restaurant, that owns the motel. The opportunity to have a successful small business, that's probably where the best economic advantages are.
I would say point out that the state of California already has requirements around small businesses and numbers, specifically not to impact those sole proprietorships and those smaller rural businesses. And by imposing this, they're going around their own policies. And I think it's what a small business is defined as 250 employees. And so, businesses that have under 45, I believe, they don't have to provide the same level of benefits. And that's according to the state of California. So why would they impose it on this, especially in rural counties where those small businesses reside? The majority of those small businesses are. So, I mean, I would point that out to them. You know, you're creating a situation that you've already avoided in a separate policy.
That's an excellent
So,
point.
you know, just a thought as a small business owner.
Now, that is such great information. That's so great. And, you know, one thing that I will say they have admitted in so many words is when we've asked questions on this, we're like, well, where did this come from? And they're like, oh, that's come from this criteria or this policy. So essentially what they did when they created this criteria is they cut and paste from a wide variety of RFPs from different agencies. So just keep that in mind, like as a lens looking at this, it was not strategically thought out.
I guess an underlying thing, and this kind of goes back to that second paragraph at the beginning. It says, okay, rural communities everywhere face unique challenges. We absolutely do, but I don't want it to be kind of like an argument that, of course, every county is special, right? I don't know that that's going to do it. Are we providing an example of saying rural communities everywhere face unique challenges, but, you know, based on a historic pattern of disinvestment in infrastructure, grants, etc., you know, we struggle, you know, and these are the same definitions that the state has used for those previous programs that have left us out. We can't use those same definitions for our area during this process to catch up. I don't know if we've made the point yet at the beginning of why, besides the, yes, every area is unique, you know, the Bay Area is unique too. Why is this harmful to us, and why is this historically, I don't know if discrimination is the right word, but why is this, you know, a structural problem with rural areas that they need to address, using terms that are stronger that they'll pay attention to?
I think we could use, I mean, if we had to prove it, we can use data just on the sizes of businesses, number of employees. You can pull data from the education systems in each county for statistics of socioeconomically disadvantaged youth, which translates to parents. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to prove this in each specific county. Not to say that we're quote unquote special, but that we do have unique challenges due to our geographic makeup and locations, that we don't attract those large scale industries.
I'd second that. I mean, I hate to keep harping as the economic development guy on data, but I think you're right, Trina. State of California actually, just for clarification, does define a small business as less than 100 people, and then there's also a monetary value. You can't make more than X amount. But I did pull the statistic just for CSED, and there 72% of the businesses in the Alpine, Amador, Calaveras, Tuolumne, and Alpine County, 72% have 9 or fewer employees.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that really drives home that point. And to even qualify for that small business threshold, there are only 34 businesses in this area that employ more than 100 people.
That's great. I mean, that's bad, but that's great data.
Well, it's our reality. Yeah,
exactly.
No, and that's, yeah, it makes the point. It is our reality.
Which side is that, Alex? Sorry, is that Eastern Sierra side?
So yeah, this is
Central
the Central
Sierra
Sierra. So that's Alpine, Amador, Calaveras,
Right.
Tuolumne.
I'm just glad I wasn't too far off on my numbers off the top of my
thank
head.
you.
That's okay.
Yeah, so 72% employ 9 or fewer employees.
Yeah, Eric, probably in the Eastern Sierra SEDS, there's the equivalent statistic somewhere.
I would think so.
Yep. Yeah. there's a lot of data lying around that this is not a satisfying answer, so I apologize, but some of the data tasks for this were delayed in light of the strategic plan. So we're revisiting this. The last paragraph here is very generic boilerplate, urging them to promote prosperity and the well-being of rural areas. So,
Can I say overall, I really think the language on this needs to be strengthened.
okay.
It's very passive and very polite, and we're not dealing with, I guess, polite situations when it comes to economic development and jobs. So it's fine, you know, as kind of a normal advocacy letter, but I think it really needs to be writing like, we're in a crisis. This is a great opportunity we want to take advantage of, but we can't do it because of the policies you have. This is what we need, and this is going to be able to help save communities. This is going to help save industry, but you have to do these things.
Right?
I would second that.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah, even the ending, we look forward to seeing positive action on behalf of our rural communities. I mean, I think, you know, that could be a lot stronger. I mean, I don't have a sense of how these definitions play into the next steps, but again, I'm at the risk of repeating myself. You know, it's my feeling we need to put something out there that works for us, and then ask them to tell us why they're not comfortable with that.
Okay.
Eric, also,
I mean, it's the straw document sort of approach, right? I'm putting something out there. If you're not telling me what you want, then tell me what's wrong with what I've put forward.
Sure. Darren?
I was going to ask also, who are we targeting this to? Is this a complete blanket statement to, you know, every member of the legislature and the governor's office and you know, the granting authority in that? Or are we actually trying to strategically, like, these are the people we need to basically change it? So, you know, is this going to GoBiz? Is this going to OPR? It doesn't seem too targeted to like a particular message. It seems broad. I don't know who exactly the audience is that we're trying to persuade, and if we're not identifying that audience, then I'm not sure we're hitting on what they might be looking for or what might resonate with them. Like, if we make these amendments, we're making a better argument of what we would like to see in it, but who are we pitching to?
In this case, it would be OPR and GoBiz because they're the ones with control over what criteria gets applied to implement.
Now, shouldn't we be tagging in then our, you know, collective legislative reps to be able to ask them to, you know, lobby on our behalf regarding this?
Yes.
Okay.
I agree.
Because no, you know, OPR and GoBiz, they're at the end of the day bureaucracies. They're not going to have the flexibility a lot of the times to maybe make changes of what they feel like they've been directed, that we would need to hit some entity like the governor's office or the legislature that can put pressure and say, actually, this is what you need to do, right?
Yeah, and I'll just echo that. And I don't think that the agencies, but in so many words, they've said that they actually are, they have to, unfortunately, they are deferring to the governor's office. So they're like, yeah, we've been fighting for certain things as well. And then they're kind of like, it's out of our control.
Right. So maybe this should be to the governor's office and they're CC'd, you know, and the governor's office has their own, you know, somewhat of an agenda that I think we could aim this at more in a more targeted fashion.
Sorry, I have to go to another meeting. Thank you guys for everything.
Myself as well. Thank you.
Uh, that's, I believe I've got all your comments down either in the document or on my little sticky notes here. So, um, unless you've got any other urgent comments you think haven't gotten out yet, I would like to move on to the next item.
Took enough time on this one.
Yeah, a little more than I was expecting, but that's fine. So,
Yeah, Eric, I hate to do it. It's one last comment. It was from really early, you skipped over, but it's in the fourth paragraph. It's imperative we recognize invaluable contributions, blah, blah, blah.
yep.
One of the things that I think is really important to hit on, this is talking about why we're important to ourselves in a broad context. It would be great to emphasize how rural areas basically provide the resources for urban area prosperity and that we're interconnected, and emphasizing that interconnectedness. The closest we kind of get there is that we are culturally relevant in a historical fashion and that we manage public lands, but we don't make the public lands connection to how we are economically part of the backbone of the rest of the state with our natural resources.
Right. Okay. So include mention of natural resources,
Well, specifically how we
importance of
urban areas. Connectedness. There we go. I think I got that. Bring back my presentation. So my initial hope of covering multiple draft strategy sections, given the amount of text, is ambitious. So is there a preference about which section folks would like to see? Perhaps governance and land tenure or housing? Again, everything that I'm about to show you will be published later today and will be reviewable for 2 weeks. So is there a particular topic amongst these three that sounds the most interesting at the moment?
Well, I think the one that hasn't been covered very much yet is the land tenure one.
The land tenure one?
Yeah, just because we talked about it a little bit. It wasn't really in any of the earlier documents.
Okay. Let's do that. That got real awkward. Some of it got copy pasted from a square into a rectangle, so forgive the formatting errors. So, foundational elements, regional development of land use and tenure, summary definition, how humans use land for economic and cultural activities, and how property rights are allocated, used, transferred, and managed for that land. Outcome statements for the following strategies and tactics are: local communities and federal and utility land managers collaborate to achieve mutual goals. A roadmap for land exchanges or divestiture of infill properties exists, not necessary for agency operations. And primary beneficiary agencies and corporations are partners in investing in local community prosperity and resource stewardship. So those are the high level outcome statements that are targets for the following strategies. I believe there are 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, there's 4, but they're all very heavy. So draft strategy 1, strengthen regional partnerships with local governments, large land management organizations, and major area employers to co-develop strategic plans addressing mutual infrastructure needs and needs. tactics include shared stewardship agreements, investing in small businesses and NGOs, identifying mechanisms for investing in infrastructure and exchange plans, and engaging with LADWP and landowners to prepare for potential land transfer if the water resource management is no longer needed.
Eric, why are we, okay, when we're talking about public lands managers, exchange and all of that, that's fine, but then specifying specifically LAWP, I've had a concern that very much a lot of the things that have come out seem to be very focused on the east side of the Sierra and not so much the west side issues, but we have BOR land, we have BLM land, we have Forest Service land. You know, it's a similar thing. If this is all talking about in terms of, you know, LADWP and those specific issues, then that's not really addressing anything within, you know, to my knowledge, at least 5 of the 7 counties. You know, if this is talking more broadly about federal and state lands, then it is. But we've got
Okay.
SFPUC and yeah, I mean, you know, the dams and all kinds of stuff.
Right. So
And for what we have there, for example, if we're going to highlight that specific issue, what about the number of irrigation districts that have dammed up, you know, the rivers within our county, which we get almost no negotiated local benefit out of, you know, from TID and MID and SFPUC, and that is just as much an extractive, unfair system. So,
sure. So add Bureau of Reclamation and the irrigation districts as either specific callouts or perhaps down here in the potential implementation partner section.
well, one thing that we've looked, if looking at tactics, is applying for a grant to make sure that they are putting fair share agreements into maintenance of the watersheds. Currently, you know, a lot of those were built without really any agreement on funding, you know, those types of things. Basically looking at historically inequitable contracts around water or land development supporting urban areas around water. That I think has broad kind of appeal.
Sorry, what fair share agreements?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't mean to be too scrutinous on it, but just recognizing that SBC traditionally works more in the Eastern Sierra and far north of a lot of our counties region. This is a little newer. A lot of it's based out of that area, so the familiarity is a lot higher. And recognizing that is a bit of a filter. We have to kind of, I think, make sure that it really is not through the lens of just that, which
Right.
are sometimes different issues.
Yeah. That's fair. And LADWP is such a singular, weird example that perhaps we added a special call out for them, but there's space on the page. We can add a little more. We don't have Bureau of Reclamation down here on these implementation partners. So yeah.
Right.
Like, you know, Forest Service, you know, housing as an example, that's probably the biggest issue that we face in our county is needing to do a housing project so they have the workforce to be able to conduct all of this stuff, not necessarily the third-party contract staff capacity. We've got the funding and hundreds of staff positions that are unfilled because we basically can't house these people.
Right. And
So I think just taking out LADWP and just echoing your language up above, saying large land management, large landowners, right? So it's not specific to LADWP.
Yeah, landowners and land managers.
Yeah, that works.
okay.
So this is Jen, and I don't disagree with any of that. You know, in your county is 96% federal land, Mono County is 94 federally managed land. But one of the reasons I think we had hoped to call out DWP was the fact that the city of Los Angeles exerts immense pressure in Sacramento. And it's not just the lands that surround our communities that are public lands or federally managed lands, it's significant amounts of the lands within our communities are owned and held by the city, which thwarts any kind of opportunities for we have small businesses that are basically shutting their doors and walking away because the leases from the city of Los Angeles have been put on hold by the mayor's office, and they're just sitting there unable to sell, transfer, renew, get operating capital, anything. And after 5 to 10 years of that, because the city of Los Angeles has political and corruption problems, 240 miles away, our economy is shut down. So it's pretty significant. I do understand the utility districts, especially on the west side, and how oftentimes those are negotiated between industry and the federal government, and counties are left out, and it is resource extractive. But the relationship with DWP is quite different. It's not just the resource extraction. So I just wanted to point that out, but for thought.
Well, Jen, I don't know, are you actually looking at the document? I know you said you were driving.
Unfortunately, yeah. I can't see it, no.
So down below it has potential implementation partners. And I think that's where Eric was talking about adding BOR. But I mean, we can put LADWP as the first item. I don't think there's any particular, it's sort of alphabetical, but not entirely. So, so we, just put, does that work?
That works for me. I just wanted to kind of point out why that has been highlighted. But yeah, no, that was me. Thank you.
And I have no issue with there being something specific on there. I just think if we're having a whole land use tenure section, it needs to include the major points for each sub-region of the Eastern Sierra. Like again, on potential implementation partners, one of the things not mentioned there is what was it? Wasn't used. Oh my God. Oh, SFPUC. I totally blanked for a sec. But SFPUC with Hetch Hetchy and their water contract to Groveland, SFPUC is not as substantial to us maybe as LADWP, but it is still fairly massive connection to a major urban area. So I throw them in as well.
Of course.
I think we're getting into the weeds here. This report's coming out later today, where we can all get it in our hot little hands and go through it line by line if we want to, and submit comments. But I think now we need more of an overview.
Okay.
Rather than worrying about wordsmithing and adding this or adding that.
Fair. Okay. So I'll go over the next three, and then I'll show you where it will be on the website and give you a quick preview of the survey where you can submit comment. So
hey Eric, really quick, can I just make one point for them to keep in mind while you're reviewing all of those strategies? So David, to your point, I think yes, kind of staying out of the weeds like a little bit, but thinking through something that we don't have in this strategic plan that this group could be really valuable on the advising side is there not necessarily one thing, but is there like one or two policies that are really holding up our region? And it's just on the topic of the land tenure issue, right? And the resource extraction that Jaron mentioned earlier. Is there something that we could include in our strategic plan? Like, yes, this is such a barrier for our region. I'm going to make this up. And we want to focus on some sort of water bond that will essentially, start forcing the urban regions to pay back. And those funds in turn would essentially fund X, Y, and Z. Some sort of housing thing or some sort of, I don't know if you get where I'm coming from, but we don't have
Eric, that would be the dream. If we could see a 1% fee hypothetically added to the SFPUC Hetch Hetchy water, the amount of customers that they have and the amount exported, that would be more than our sales tax.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like I said, we're gonna defer to you guys on this, but like, is there something that something like that, so minor, 1%, that could have such a huge benefit and it could help keep this whole effort sustainable moving forward? So I'll stop there.
Yeah, no,
Something to
you're
keep.
absolutely on the right track, Erica. I mean, it's if you're if you're willing to put something in there, that's something that, we've talked about. And certainly Sierra Nevada Conservancy did the study in 2014, the avoided cost analysis on the Mokelumne River. And they did that specifically because the Mokelumne River provides, I've forgotten, 99% of the water that's used in the East Bay. And for years, I pestered Nick Instis, who was the lead scientist on that, about, well, has East Bay Mud raised their rates? And the answer's always been no. Very recently, he said, well, maybe there's something that they might do. And I need to follow up with him on that. But there is no compensation, and there's no recognition that if these watersheds are seriously damaged by wildfire, that at a minimum, the cost of processing the water, the siltation and ash removal, will cost the utilities more. We're just not there. Denver Municipal got the message years ago, but nobody in California has.
East Bay Mud actually does support the Upper Mokelumne watershed. I can't remember what UMRA. I can't remember what it stands for. They do invest in the upper watershed.
Did they
don't
raise
invest
their
as far
rates,
up-
or
No, I don't know about their rates, but they do invest in the upper watershed. They don't quite make it to the top in Alpine County, but they do. They do it farther
okay?
down.
Well, this
Okay.
is like SFPUC technically invests in a pre-apprenticeship program that graduates 10 people a year. And I think they give reduced water rates to Groveland. So it's not that we don't get any benefit out of it. They do invest. It's just nowhere near what is extracted. I don't know if it's a similar situation with UMRA, but
Yeah,
I'm sure what UMRA is investing is trivial compared to what the revenue is.
Yeah, the proportionality isn't there.
So
Yeah, I agree with all that.
Oh,
thank you, Jen.
So let me kind of just go over the next few. And to one of Jaren's earlier points, housing is its whole own section. So you won't see much mention of housing in these 4 slides, but it's there.
all right, I won't bug you about it, Eric. Promise.
So under land use and tenure, draft strategy 2, work with federal and other public land management agencies to develop collaborative plans to address local community and economic development needs. Draft tactics include ensuring federal and state agency plans incorporate local priorities, working with agencies to improve community connectivity through a regional trail network, work with land management agencies to develop environmentally and economically sustainable agriculture plans. And there is some overlap between these and sector industry strategies, which all again have their own sections.
Eric, I just had attended the tourism one too, and I know that we talked about the trail system, but it does seem to very much only be focused on public lands trail systems. Whereas, when we think of a regional trail system within our county, we're thinking of where people live and visit, which is not necessarily developing, a cross-county U.S. Forest Service path and more Forest Service campgrounds that don't pay TOT. So only throwing that in, that I hope that's not the only place where we talk about trails is on federal lands, because that's not as applicable to us.
Systems, not just on big federal parks.
Yeah, not just with public lands management agencies, but private land easements.
Strategy 3, advocate as a region to establish regional environmental justice plans and policies that retain the benefits of resource exportation in the communities of origin. Tactics, there's several. Advocate as a region for state policies recognizing carbon credits for fuel mitigation projects. Collaborate with metropolitan utility providers to be partners in local community development needs. Develop impact fee systems for resort corporations. Ensure payment in lieu of taxes. And other compensations are commensurate with the value of ecosystem services. So that's getting back to what we were talking about earlier. Identify state and federal resources for innovations in ecosystem services. Integrate the various state plans and land use planning like 30 by 30, and investigate feasibility of partnering with conservation finance organizations to fund ecosystem management.
What does that last one mean? There was a proposal at the state, and I think actually with the stock exchange, they were trying to create an investment fund to be able to purchase land and set it aside without management plans, which we strongly opposed. And this seems to rhyme with something like that, where they would be purchasing land to put conservation easements without necessarily management plans of already very restricted amounts of private land in our counties. And anytime I see the 30 stuff in that, I'm very hesitant because we're 78% federal. Like the idea of taking more of that land that's already in private timber ag, we're only 6% non-federal, non-ag, non-timber.
Right. Okay, so on the first point, I don't think what you just said is what you just described is what this is referring to. I think this is referring to things. I think it's called Blue Finance. I worked with it in one of my past water.
Oh, Blue Forest.
Blue Forest.
Yeah, Blue Forest. Yeah.
Where they take investment from various entities to fund large scale land management projects, and they pay back the initial investments through slight increases or levies on, I'm lost in my words here, on the land management agencies that control that land pay back the initial investment over time.
Okay.
Yeah, Jared, this is not something like the Williamson Act that takes things off the tax rolls and locks it away. This is totally different, as Eric explained.
Let me just ask my colleagues, board member colleagues, I'm trying to remember, is there not an environmental justice segment now that's required in our general plans? Am I misremembering that?
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
I believe there was a
right.
bill. Yeah, there was a bill that was passed. We had to do our climate element, which I think is our version of what you did for the economic and climate whatever plan in Mariposa.
Yeah, so you might want to think about including something along those lines. Since we all have to do it, maybe that's an area where we could collaborate and maybe develop a more coordinated effort along to achieve the state's objectives with that segment.
Okay.
We're all going to have to do it, so let's do it together, and hopefully that'll derive some side benefit other than just being able to just check a box.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that.
Eric, one thing on this too with the early draft strategy, I know I keep bringing up renewable energy, export, hydrogen, variety of things. So in terms of environmental justice, which is very closely tied with social justice when we're talking about, I think, investments and economic development, I think one of the tactics is making sure that as we're doing investments in environmentally beneficial projects, we are advocating for our region to have those investments here. So as an example, there's 450 solar projects in the state right now. 400 are in the San Joaquin Valley, about 50 are in the desert. 0 of them are in any of the mountain counties that I'm aware of. So we're very much missing out on the entire state power transition for SB 100.
Right. Okay. Um, great. We're running up on approaching 90 minutes here. So the last strategy, a little shorter. Collaborate with metropolitan utility providers to localize workforce development. Tactics, establish career training programs and forward-looking jobs in water management and electricity production. Establish training programs to support professional careers in land management and ecosystem services, including land use, environmental planning, engineering. Some
Why
overlap.
is solar
Go ahead,
not on there again?
Sorry, Jaron, can you repeat that?
Sorry, it just, why is solar not on there again for electricity production?
Well, we do
I
have
know
it. We have
we're
we have
taking
an
up too much.
entire section, Darren, that's dedicated to clean energy.
Yeah, I know. I've had it hasn't really been included in a lot of those, at least of what I've seen. I'll just hold my comments there. I've got your slideshow so I can email them. I know I'm taking up a lot of time on it, but
Well, yeah, so, and on that note, page here. So, I would not take notes on my slideshow because it does not have the whole thing in it. Later today, my colleague Jill will be sending out a blast to the whole collaborative, sharing this strategies packet and describing what to do with it and how to provide comment. So this is at sierrajobsfirst.org. It will be at sierrajobsfirst.org/strategic-plan. And here you'll be able to download the whole thing. I believe it's at 85 pages. So get your coffee ready.
love it.
And then we've created a feedback form, which is not yet linked here, but I'll give you a quick preview of it. So this will be linked from that website a little bit later today. The review period will be from today to July 8th. And then we'll close the first comment period. The writing team will pour over everything, make some adjustments, and then publish it for a second review period, I believe on July 21st, late July
25th.
25th. And then there will be a second comment period before it comes to the governing council in August. So there's 2 comment periods. Once you all have access to this form, it'll just ask for your name and your email. And because there's 11 sections, you can pick which sections you want to get a comment on. Should let you fill it out multiple times, I'm going to guess, if you want to do it in chunks. But you can like pick, I want to comment on elements 1 and 2. Then it will show you kind of the top lines, the outcomes and the strategies, and ask you for your comments. For readability reasons, it won't have all the tactics, which is why we encourage people to have the document open somewhere else so that they can cross-reference as they're providing comment. This is what it will look like. That will be coming out later today on sierrajobsfirst.org/strategic-plan.
Thank you, Eric. I've got to hop off. Have a good weekend, everybody, and thanks
Thank
for
you.
all the information.
Bye.
Thanks, Rosemary. See you soon.
Bye. Bye.
So that was all of the points that I well, not all of them, because we only got through one section, but those were the major points. And the next steps is that'll all be coming out today in an email. You should see it. If you don't, ping us and we'll forward it to you. So again, there are two weeks to review that and provide as many detailed comments as you like, and tell us who we left out and what things we left out of it. So,
Hey, Eric, I don't know if you already said this, but I just wanted to highlight this one point for David and Jaren. So just as a heads up, this is a draft strategies packet. So it's just the strategies, the outcomes, and the tactics. So it won't be the entire strategic plan that we submit to the state in August, because we have 2 public comment periods. We wanted to make sure this is what we really need feedback on, are these strategies and tactics. So it's going to be horizontal, where the final deliverable will be a vertical document, if that makes, so it's literally will be a completely different looking doc. I just wanted to make sure that that was a clear point. So if you're like, oh, something looks like it's missing, it's not missing. We're just trying to expedite and make sure that we capture everyone's feedback on the really critical pieces.
Okay.
we are just about at time. Do you have any final questions about what's happening about the strategic plan?
No, other than you're going to ruin my weekend.
Are you kidding? You'll enjoy this,
David,
right,
we count on
David?
you.
Finally, I have something to do this weekend.
Finally. Hey, I'm gonna jump off. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. I'm sorry I was so in and out, but I appreciate all your input. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
You.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank
Okay.
you both.
Thanks,
Take
David.
care.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.